Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Coresight and Blue Yonder's Open for Business. Today's special guest is Katie Finnegan, Chief Consumer Experience and E-commerce Officer at Rite Aid. We'll now turn it over to JoAnn Martin of Blue Yonder and Deborah Weinswig, CEO and co-founder of Coresight Research.
Thanks, Drew. Good morning and welcome to Open for Business. I'm your co-host, Deborah Weinswig, and I'm honored to be joined by my co-host, JoAnn Martin, who is the VP of Retail at Blue Yonder. JoAnn has extensive strategic retail experience and a proven track record across apparel, footwear, and accessories, including L Brands, DSW, and Luxottica. In her role at Blue Yonder, she is the industry thought leader for retail. Her expertise also includes merchandise planning, item planning, assortment planning, allocation, and omnichannel inventory enablement. I'll turn the call over to JoAnn now for some opening remarks. Thanks, JoAnn.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks. I'm super excited to be here with you and Katie today to talk through some of the challenges and opportunities we're seeing within supply chain. Blue Yonder, which is an end-to-end supply chain platform company formerly known as JDA, we get the benefit of talking to customers globally, both manufacturing and retail, about their supply chains and about challenges they're seeing. And we're seeing and hearing four major themes, whether it be through our customer engagement or through other conversations we're having within the industry. And those themes really revolve around four major things. And one of them is supply chain visibility and resilience, and trying to understand proactively disruptions in the supply chain and how retailers and manufacturers are proactively diagnosing those and then being able to manage them with exception-based management. One of the other themes is forecasting and replenishment. How do I leverage ML and AI to be able to have more predictive forecasting and demand within my supply chain? We're definitely hearing from our customers that those leveraging ML are seeing better in-stocks and more responsive, reactive time to value of getting their inventory into their stores and being able to offer it to the customers for availability. And then as well as workforce, so many things going on with workforce outside of safety of associates and managing those trends. We're also working through scheduling optimization, as well as balancing the skill sets of workers out in the environment today, whether they be essential or non-essential, and trying to manage tasks efficiently. And then finally, the biggest conversation that's really emerging is with the surge of e-commerce. How are we leveraging omni capabilities, and what is the impacts to the supply chain for the final mile? So lots of different discussions out there right now, but very fortunate to be able to be here today. Thanks.
Thanks, JoAnn. So for those of you who don't know Katie, which I think most of us in the retail and innovation areas do and have had the pleasure, Katie Finnegan recently joined Rite Aid as the Chief Consumer Experience and E-commerce Officer. She was also the founder and principal of Store Number 8, which is Walmart's incubation arm. She launched 4 portfolio companies in under 3 years, including Jet Black, Walmart and Home Delivery, Walmart's Intelligent Retail Lab, and Spatial. Katie brings a real passion for retail and entrepreneurship to incubation, which we've always very much admired. She joined Walmart via the Jet.com acquisition, where she was the head of Corp Dev, Strategy, and Investor Relations, reporting directly to CEO Mark Lowry. Katie joined Jet in 2014 with the acquisition of Huckster, the retail tech startup she co-founded in 2012. With that, we'd like to welcome Katie. Today, we're going to discuss innovation in retail and supply chain and what the new normal might look like. As always, we'll have a transcript and video available on our site in about 24 hours, and we will launch poll questions after we start the call. Lastly, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen during our conversation if you'd like to ask questions. So with that, we'll get things started. So Katie, I think the big question on everyone's mind right now is, what is in the kind of retail world globally appetite for innovation right now?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Deborah and JoAnn, and thanks for that nice introduction. You know, I think the appetite has shifted, hopefully not too dramatically for the long term, but what you're really seeing in the market is kind of a bifurcation where the appetite is actually, I would say, accelerated in some places along solutions that can really add, you know, value to today's new norm and today's customers' needs, and potentially probably decelerated on things that are a little bit further out and also not nearly as relevant for today's consumers' needs. And so things like curbside delivery, as you've seen, you know, there are companies that have had that on their roadmap for years and years, and some companies stood that up in a matter of 72 hours. And so maybe not everything's not operationalized as perfectly, but that's really the definition of minimum viable product. And so you're seeing a lot of large companies that maybe wouldn't necessarily take as much risk and do something in a sort of ad hoc minimum viable product way, being willing to do that. And it's really been great because they're able to adjust and serve the consumers in the way they need to be served today based on, you know, the new norm in the world of COVID. And a lot of these things are probably not going to drastically go away, you know, post 6 or 12 months from now, even when there is a vaccine.
So Katie, when you look at the technologies that are out there with these innovations, where are the ones that you see that are most prevalent and really important to kind of focus on for retailers? What is the most important thing for them to kind of be thinking about coming out of COVID, and where should they be looking to technology to help?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, there's probably two main areas. And for me, my point of view of one, it's sort of less around experiential retail as it maybe has been in the last 3 to 5 years. So I'm still a big fan of AR and VR, but I see that taking a little bit of a back seat to solutions and innovation around, you know, supply chain, inventory control, and on-demand manufacturing. Those to me seem to be, you know, the sort of like really bumped up in need and priority based on what's going on. And again, in a post-COVID world, however we define what that is, I don't see that changing. And so that really has accelerated and come to the forefront more so than some of this other experiential stuff. Because you're really seeing consumers spend their money in, and that's some of that is the economic and financial climate, on less experiential goods, less dispensable income, and more essential services.
Katie, you've been a real hero for many of the retail tech startups. You've breathed life into them. You've helped drive awareness. What do you think is the appetite for large organizations to work with startups right now in this very uncertain environment?
Yeah, I think that, you know, there is actually a huge opportunity, probably more so than there has been. And so kind of getting to my earlier point about seeing, you know, large companies issue minimum viable products, right? So to roll out, for example, again, go back to curbside in a way that might be analog, right? They don't have an order management system in place. They haven't integrated the full, you know, API solution, but they're just like picking and packing like, you know, anyone else would have done in a more analog world. And so as a result, I think the risk tolerance is higher and they're really just looking for fast solutions. And so startups that really focus again on those areas, I would say around supply chain, last mile delivery, and manufacturing and sort of on-demand inventory, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Other places where it's more experiential, that probably is not as much of a priority today, and it would be harder to get face time to have those conversations.
So when you think about the experiential kind of not necessarily taking a back seat, but how do you see the customer buying behaviors changing during this time? And how do you expect that to transition coming out of COVID, or do you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm sort of versed on holistic retail as much as probably, you know, yourself and Deborah is, really, because I focus on certain categories. And over the last 5+ years, it's really been about mass retail and grocery and general merchandise in those places. And so, you know, those are more so essential categories. But my gut is, and really, if you just look at, you know, the way consumers live, Twitter announced today that their employee base can be at home for the indefinite future. And so that really just changes, you know, what items do they even have to have in their closet? What does their daily routine look like? Even, you know, do you bring, if you're not going to an office, do you bring your pet to daycare, or do you actually take care of it? So there's so many like underlying things that change as a result of that one tweak in sort of a consumer's everyday behavior. I'm not saying every company will move towards an indefinite at home place, but I do think there's going to be a real shift, right? In this concept of having to be in person, FaceTime, 24/7. I would say overwhelmingly is going to go away. That doesn't mean everything's remote, but there's probably going to be a balance, which will really impact every piece of the customer's day-to-day life, and that then, you know, translates to spending.
You bring up a really important point, right? You've joined Rite Aid during this time where we're all working from home and physically separated. How do you think for, kind of new employees in general, this environment, right? How challenging is that? And how are you finding, kind of companies at large, kind of integrating workforces and helping, just helping employees at large right now?
Yeah, I'd say, the sort of younger employee base, it's probably a little bit more natural. They're very used to digital communications. There definitely is this concept of Zoom fatigue, and I know there's been some HBS articles about it and stuff, but it's a weird concept where, if we were in person, it's a different psychological demand, right? But being constantly on video, it just has a different impact. And I think part of it is, just so small, not having the time to walk from one office to another office. So you don't have that 37-second break where you can just clear your head. You're literally going from video chat to video chat. And so things like Slack have been amazing to create that sort of water cooler talk environment, right? Where you can create Slack channels and sort of still have jokes and get to know people's personalities outside of the transactional Zoom chats. But I also think we need to get much better, and myself included, at blocking 15-minute windows every 2 or 3 hours. Honestly, just like going to the bathroom or getting a glass of water. Because that's really been, I think, the big drain on people is there really isn't this separation of church and state anymore. And personally, I can say, the joke is like you pour a glass of wine at the end of the day because that's how you're not working and you're at home, right? And so you have to find probably more sustainable ways to sort of bifurcate your life so it's not, omnipresent in your life and you're able to turn things off and turn it on when it's the right time for you, which with kids at home, especially now, might not be 9 to 5. And I would say, from what I've heard anecdotally, most employers have been very understanding about that. But I think that's really important to let people know that when I'm working isn't necessarily always when you're working, and I'm okay with that. I don't need just because you're always on Slack or always on this, I don't need a response within, 12 seconds.
Thanks, Katie. That's a great perspective. You introduced the concept a little bit ago about on-demand manufacturing and talking about that. There's a lot of conversations about assortments and how we're narrowing, but can you expand upon that? Like, how do you see on-demand manufacturing impacting retailers today, and what could some benefits of it be, or what could it look like?
Yeah, I think, we just need to get smarter about inventory levels in certain places. And so I don't believe the demand for personalized or unique or special products will go away. But the need to have that inventory, replicated across 4,400 stores or whatever your physical footprint looks like, you don't necessarily need it physically there to sell it. And so, whether there's digital experiences or ways that you introduce the SKU, but then personalize it in a way where you can still get it same day, 1 day, 2 day. The customer, I believe, is sort of trained now. 1 day, 2 day is the norm, and that makes sense. And so if you can find a way to really rationalize your overall inventory position, but still have that quote unquote long tail, I think that's going to be essential for, the financial health of, in particular, fashion and dispensable income industries in retail.
You talked about, it's very interesting, we at Coresight have helped a few retailers think about assortment optimization because of this idea of wanting to be in stock when the consumer comes into a physical box. How do you think retailers think about choice and, kind of national brands versus private label, just from a very kind of big picture perspective? I mean, what we see in store and what we see online will be different. So I guess number one, what do you think about kind of the in-store offering? And then number two, right, we still see a lot of differences between online and offline, whether it's from a merchandise perspective, even pricing, or kind of on brand. How do you think about that in terms of, kind of where we are and where we're going?
Yeah, I mean, I would answer it kind of with a framework versus a sort of direct answer, where I believe each retailer has to have a distinct customer value proposition that they stand for. And so what is their pricing strategy, assortment strategy, what is their experience strategy, and And they need to be able to, across, those four different verticals within like 12 bullet points, right? So like 3 bullet points for each, like what am I known for with regards to pricing? And to your point, private label products might be my accessible price point that is really high quality and what I'm known for and what drives traffic to me. But you really have to think about what's differentiating that you're delivering across those different pieces outside of the Amazons of the world and some of these other mass players where you will not be the best price, right? Or you won't be for long, right? Because you won't be able to afford to do it. So what is the reason for coming and shopping with you? And that same question goes for what is the reason for coming and shopping with you in store versus digitally? And you need to have a distinct value proposition for the customer. And it's not always price, right? It can be unique exclusive products, but it could also be like an amazing experience with amazing editorial content and education that becomes part of the buying process.
That's great. When you think about that and you start to think about the assortments and what they stand for, how do you see the role of the store changing a little bit in the dynamic, right? Final mile is emerging as a much bigger topic, but do you see a contraction in that with engagement, or do you see it maintaining? Where do you see the role of the store within the configuration and channels?
Yeah, I think that depends largely on the actual company and the store. And again, what value it's driving in the eyes of the customer. What are they doing different from every other option that customer has available to them? But overall, I believe strongly that the stores, a physical footprint, and the store is such a loaded term because it has such preconceived notions, but a physical footprint is not going away. But the role and I would say 6 months ago, I could say it a little bit, and maybe there's pushback on some of these, but the role of the physical footprint will change. And so, we'll have to figure out a way to do things in a COVID world where it's clean and it's safe and all those things. But to me, there is, and it's kind of interesting to see in these last couple months where we're really like yearning for human connection and community building and engagement, right? And so I do believe the store can serve a very interesting and unique purpose where customers do want to come together. They want to learn, they want to experience, they want to have fun while shopping. That's not going to be solved by virtual reality in totality, right? People want to actually see other people. And so to me, the physical footprint is less about proximity to goods, which I think is kind of been what it's been for the last generation. Because to your point, that's being solved and streamlined pretty quickly with the Instacarts of the world and other things like that. And it's more about education, experience, and a personalized human connection.
Katie, you made me think about, so my grandfather owned a drugstore way back when, and he was really kind of the center of the community, right? People would bring in donuts and it really was this fabric of the local community. And right, somebody would come in the morning, they would tell him something, then he would tell someone else. So in some ways, it almost seems, right, like the purpose of the store, especially I think more kind of convenient neighborhood stores, is almost going kind of, in a different direction. I think in a good way, right? More about the human connection and more about relationships going forward.
Yeah, and to build on that, and outside of just convenience, you're seeing the blurring of the lines between content, commerce, and experience hospitality. And these are it's just a way to sort of solve a need, right? And so, for example, let's just say I have an issue with sleep, right? I can take melatonin, but I can also use blue light therapy. I can probably do breathing exercises. Like there's things that I might not sell to you that can solve that. And you're seeing even if you look at the Goops of the world that really started editorial, you're seeing that it's really just about a holistic approach to what you want and what you need. And these retailers or even these hospitality players that are turning into retailers just want to be the place that you go to for that thing. And sometimes we make direct margin on it because we sell stuff, but other times we basically increase lifetime value and stickiness of the customer because we, pointed them in the direction of, a sleep therapist that could help them, that maybe we don't actually make money off it, but we created that connection and therefore we're your trusted sort of go-to advisor. And so I think the community piece is really important, and it really plays on this fact that it's like customers just want the friction to be removed, and it's less about sort of a one-to-one transaction as to I go here to get this thing. I go here to solve this problem, and the problem could be I want to look beautiful for prom, right? And so I buy a prom dress, but then we might also help you with hair and makeup and think about things that, again, are outside of our core service offering. And so I think that that's really what you're seeing of the blurring of the lines between this sort of traditional editorial content and experiential and hospitality and commerce are really becoming one.
So when you think about the role of an associate, when you're starting to talk about this dynamic in that training, and one of the challenges for many years has been to get the associate to the same level that a customer coming in with the same visibility and the technology enabling them, how do you see the enablement of the associate changing as we transition through these times and the roles start to change?
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces, right? There's roles of the associate that are operational roles, really the roles that honestly, a lot of times in the eyes of the associate, they're not feeling fulfilled from that task as well. And so there's a lot of great technology that will help reduce that friction, right? So out of stocks on shelves and things like that, and even, cash pay and go technology and stuff like that. However, I think the other side of the role is increasing in prevalence and importance, right? And so instead of having this concept of like a general athlete, everyone do everything, we do want associates, or more so you'll see, to be a strong representative of the brand. And if the brand stands for, great fashion, they have to really understand fashion. If the brand stands for health and wellness, they have to understand it. And so the two real ways or three real ways you solve that is, one, obviously your hiring process and practices, but two, more so is turnover is probably one of the biggest things you need to solve for. And what do you pay your associates, or what are your retention mechanisms? I think there's going to be a lot more focus on that, because that is like the number one reason as to why you don't have this deep expertise at a mass scale. And then the second is technology. There'll be a lot of technology, hands-free, augmented reality technology, and with artificial intelligence that can serve up information in a pretty seamless way. So in the eyes of the consumer, it's sort of coming from the mind of the associate, but they don't have to memorize everything themselves.
Well, it'll be interesting, Katie, you bring up, what we see in other parts of the world, like in the East, there's about 12 touch points with a consumer before they convert, and it's about 4 touch points in the US, just because there's a lot more education and research that's available. As that starts to proliferate here in the US, right, as we become more digitized and omni-channel, if you will, it'll be interesting, because the assumption on my end would be that the consumer, when they're in their store, they're ready to convert, right? They want to purchase something to solve a particular need, whether it's sleep or whatnot. But they do need the help of the associate, I think, in many cases, right, to decipher what the kind of best product is. So it's almost, right, you're going to have, for lack of a better way to put it, right, specialists in your stores who will be experts on topics who can really help the consumers make decisions faster. And with that, what technology do the associates need to enable them so that they can appear to be those, experts that the customers need?
Yeah, so to me, there's probably two things. There's one, technology that helps with sort of upfront education. So Walmart has had a lot of success with virtual reality. And so with virtual reality and simulations, you actually have a 37% higher retention rate of information, because you're a character in experiencing it, right? So you're not just like passively watching a screen and learning things, you're actually a character, right? It's almost like playing a video game. And so the retention is just exponentially higher. And that's honestly, if you look at some of the virtual reality that goes into some of these programs for training associates, it's still pretty early stages from a fidelity and content perspective, if you compare that to the fidelity and sort of gamification that exists in video games. And so that 37% can actually be significantly higher, I think, over time. So that's one piece, and that's sort of upstream. But then I think the second piece is, and we got to figure out a way to not make it creepy, but I think there is an opportunity to have some hands-free augmented reality. And I actually loved what Air New Zealand, and again, it was a little bit before its time, but Air New Zealand had these augmented reality glasses that their flight attendants would wear. And it was a little bit too uncanny valley, but basically they'd use facial recognition. And so they would know, you're Deborah, you're, you know, a super premium customer, and you really like seltzer with a splash of cranberry in it. And so they would say, hey, Deborah, thank you, welcome back. And, you know, I have your seltzer ready for you. And then you could say, oh, actually today I want something else. But it had that sort of hands-free way where they served up personal preferences. And so there's the opportunity to do that. One, you can do it from a facial recognition, but also just hands-free information, right? And so you can have audio hearing the customer's question, and AI can easily, again, with about, you know, 90% match right now, there's always going to be those pieces that you need a human in the loop, or you need to follow up with them, you can't answer. But 90% of those questions, you could automate pretty well with a quote unquote bot in the back end, fueling that information to the associate.
Thanks, JoAnn. Do you want to ask more questions? I'll go through the poll results.
Sure, absolutely. So there's a lot of conversations now about not just how the role of the store is transitioning, but the location of the store, given all of the omni capabilities, buy online, pick up at curb now. Do you see it being advantageous for kind of freestanding stores more so than mall locations, and see them gaining traffic and kind of some viability through some of these things being offered?
Well, I haven't thought of that question because I haven't been involved in the mall world for a while now. So it's a good question. You know, the mall has a really great opportunity, and whether it's an indoor sort of traditional mall or shopping center, like a lifestyle center, which I know is sort of more of the growth mechanism these days, there's a really great opportunity. And again, if it executes, to have some sort of consortium, right? Because what the mall provides is access to diversity at, you know, a much smaller footprint. And so I think there's probably some really cool things you can do to reduce friction for the customer and allow them to cross shop, right? Like, I might want this from this store and this from this store. How can you make it super easy for me to get it with one curbside pickup? That obviously requires likely the mall operator to probably drive that than the individual stores, but they have to be willing to, like, for example, in a perfect scenario, I would have, you know, one cart that I would check out across multiple stores. And are retailers willing to do that at this point? You know, maybe now, probably maybe not a year ago, but actually maybe now. And to me, if you can do that, that adds a differentiated value to the customer, but it can't have the friction of having to go multiple places. And even, you know, at some malls, you actually drive and you park in different places because they're so large. And so you have to reduce that for the customer. And that probably takes some sort of like unified approach that I haven't seen. No, I know a lot of, you know, Westfield has looked at that. A lot of people have, but I haven't seen it really happen or take off yet.
Yeah, no, it's a huge opportunity. Let me go through and share our poll question results. So in what tech areas is your company investing? 42% said supply chain and logistics, and 58% said customer experience, 0% in AR and VR, which is pretty consistent, Katie, with what you said. Any surprises there, JoAnn?
No, I'm a little bit surprised about the customer experience, unless as I think about that, it's more about accessibility and visibility for the customer, understanding where the products are. I kind of tie them hand in hand a little bit with forecasting. So to me, I think they're kind of very similar in nature is how I would interpret that. Katie, do you have a different perspective?
And yeah, my gut is it's customer experience with regards to operations and friction, right? So like, you know, pay and go and self-checkout and things like that, more so than like front-end experience on the discovery process. That would be my gut.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, second, as a retailer, are you narrowing your assortments, and if so, by how much? 50% are moderately narrowing, 25% extensively, and 25% minimally. So if I were to kind of put a flag, say people are moderately narrowing assortments. Katie, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a hard question to answer broadly. It really depends on the sector you're in. And again, I think there's an opportunity to not narrow your assortment, but narrow your inventory. And so that's I don't know how people perceive that question, but that could be part of it too.
JoAnn,
But I
any
think
thoughts?
narrowing your inventory is, it doesn't really even matter what sector you're in. Getting your turns faster is like, probably should be one of the top 3 priorities.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. We're seeing definitely and hearing a lot about SKU rationalization and contracting of assortments, but I would say it's at the beginning stages of that and trying to understand how significantly that will impact assortments versus the composition of assortment based off of kind of what Katie is saying. Is it sourced differently or something to that extent? So it doesn't surprise me that much.
All right, so the last question, how are you developing your demand forecasting? Only 8% are using ML and AI solutions, which is obviously a significant opportunity. 92%, kind of as we had discussed, kind of in our pre-call, are still statistically based. So it's, kind of, it's a huge area of opportunity. JoAnn, is that consistent with what you would have thought?
It's consistent with where it is, but what I would tell you is it's not consistent with the forward-looking conversations coming out of COVID. I think that historically, most people have used statistical forecasts and have seen the challenges that it's posed to their supply chains during times like this in the pandemic. So our conversations have shifted, and I think it's accelerated the technology curve significantly in AI and ML, where it was everybody was trying to figure out what does it look like? Are we moving there, and how should I think about it? Now it's a necessity, and how quickly can I do that? So I think the conversations are shifting. I'm not surprised on where they are right now from a demand forecasting, but I think that that statistic will most likely look significantly different in a year's time.
Katie, on the kind of ML/AI side in general, what do you think the appetite is for retailers in terms of investing in these technologies specifically, right? I feel like we've been talking about it extensively for 18 months. How does the current environment change that one way or another?
Again, I just think the openness to needing to do things differently has really accelerated, right? And so doing things in a minimum viable product and testing and learning, I would say the issue really is underlying with retail, and I would say mass retail, right? I think the digitally native brands definitely were cut from a different cloth, but is people understand, quantitatively, oh, I see that this is valuable, but they don't have the talent in-house, and they don't truly understand like where to go and how to do it. And I would say the third thing that really, I'm a big fan of AI/ML, but I also sort of have I started my career as a merchant at J.Crew under Mickey Drexler. I have like my Mickey Drexler hat on, where there is a huge risk and concern with swinging the pendulum too far. And there is this qualitative je ne sais quoi that goes to merchandising and curation and assortment that you can't lose. And so the concern I've seen with solutions, that are startups or Silicon Valley type companies is they're truly approaching it 100% from an engineering point of view and don't have that sort of merchant insight. And I'm not saying that merchant insight has to be like a human intervention, but that has to be an input into the algorithm. And so you're losing a little bit of the human point of view. And so I don't think retailers have probably tested with it enough, but the risk or probably the initial feedback is like, it's too simplified. And a lot of the times the people that are going after these solutions don't have any retail background. And so you need to find that comfortable middle ground. I think it's essential to find it, but you need to find it. You need to get the right talent in-house so that you feel you're owning those solutions, right? This can't be something you outsource to a team and then you get this magic crystal ball back.
That's a great answer. JoAnn, do you want to kick off our Q&A? Katie, we'll get through as many as we can. We'll help you kind of navigate the Q&A because there are so many. And we want to thank you for your patience in advance.
All right, so our first question, and I think you addressed this a little bit, but we'll just revisit it real quick, is what are the top 3 priorities for store managers? Do they have the tech to support them?
And these are questions for me, right? Let's make sure
Yes.
I'm understanding. Okay. I'd say right now, store managers, number one, and this is again in like literally today's environment, is maintaining like operational viability. And so I hear time and time again, how are you protecting your associates? How are you making them feel comfortable coming to work? Because again, when it came back to the other comment I said, in a lot of these mass retail situations, there's really high turnover. And I think that's that's, oh, you know, it's kind of funny because there's, you know, this huge unemployment pandemic that's happening, but there's also this other piece where it's people feel scared to go to work. And how do you create an environment where you want people to want to be there? And that will then flow through to the customer experience and all of those things. And so doing that in a super stressful environment where oftentimes sales are down and there is like other operational considerations, I think it's taking over an overwhelming degree of mind share for store managers today.
This is a question that I've recently spent a lot of time on, so I'd love to hear your answer. How much movement do you see or anticipate toward the growth of dark stores, i.e. stores as mini DCs or fulfillment depots?
Yeah, no, dark stores is, and it's funny, you know, Deborah, we've talked a lot about this. In China, there's a lot of, it's a very successful model there. I think there's an opportunity there, but I think more so, and again, this is, I haven't spent extensive sort of modeling on this. What I think is really exciting, or sort of more where I'd want to spend my time, is looking at that four-walled box and understanding how I'm allocating space, right? So what's experiential, what's front of store versus what is quote unquote dark store. And so you can have a robotic picking station if you have enough volume to warrant that you do. But I don't think you necessarily, I think the efficiencies of last mile delivery and quite honestly, the opportunity of providers to do that, you don't need to be within 2 miles, right, to get a 2-hour delivery service level at scale. And so I don't think you need tons of little places. And again, it depends on the company and the footprint they have. But generally speaking, it's more so just reconsidering how you're laying out the space. So, you know, if you have a really large pick from store, deliver to home, whether it's via Instacart or like ship from home model, picking in the floor layout that a customer picks is very inefficient. It's costly. And so it's like, oh, if it warrants it, you might lay out the picking area or actually automate the picking area, you know, in 1,500 square feet in a back room and sort of decrease the amount of square footage that customers can engage with. But I don't know if you necessarily need to stand up tons of dark stores to do that. I think you look at your current footprint and actually just decide what you really need to be customer facing versus not.
Great answer.
So the next question is, what is the greatest challenge for on-demand manufacturing? So when you think about on-demand, it's somewhat of a difference. If you're keeping your inventories leaner, what do you think some of the challenges to retailers that could pose?
So I haven't looked at that probably for 2 or 3 years. We did do some work with it at Store 8. And I would say it just didn't seem to be there yet from a technical, or it wasn't there in a broad enough set of categories, right? So there were certain things that it could do pretty well, but it wasn't enough that it would really drastically impact inventory turns and holding costs. So to me, that's a big challenge. I think there's also a huge opportunity to do, you know, so on-demand manufacturing, I think of as sort of like hard goods, but also like on-demand farming and food production. There's a lot of cool science around. There was this one company we looked at, I remember, called Appeal Sciences, where they can actually speed up or slow down the ripening of produce. And so, you know, if you look at food, and food is, you know, it was a big category in my old life, about 50% of it goes to waste. And that's all just based on, you know, not having the right inventory levels at the right time to meet demand. And so if you can actually manipulate in a safe sort of holistic way, right, that doesn't do anything bad to the produce, if you can manipulate the ripening process, that really becomes really interesting. And so things like that also I look at as on demand, not necessarily manufacturing, but maybe sort of ripening.
If you didn't, so this is going in a different direction. If you didn't have the ability to do BOPUS or touchless, what designs or operations would you implement? Obviously, you could still do BOPUS or touchless, but I'll let you address the question.
Yeah, I mean, like off the bat, I would work with Instacart and you know, Uber Eats, or it depends on what you sort of sell. But there's a lot of marketplace services that can provide you this, like, overnight, I mean, maybe in a week or whatever, but pretty seamlessly ability to leverage physical in-store inventory and get to customers in a very fast time frame.
One of the questions is really surrounding around privacy and just overall impact to privacy concerns of customers as we're talking about this final mile and delivery, and any perspective on impacts or things to consider.
Yeah, it's interesting because the privacy concerns are real, but they also create a lot of friction, right? And so if we actually knew who you were, we could make your experience better. And so my point of view is you have to find that right balance as to, if I'm just stealing your data to sort of add value to my company or add value to us or sell it, right, to create financial gain, the customer will not stand for that. But I do believe if I'm leveraging your data in a way to actually reduce friction and make your life easier, and you see this more so with younger consumers, right? So over generations, that will sort of be a majority of the income being spent in the market. If I can provide tangible value to you, then customers seem to be more interested in it. And so to me, it's like we just got to find the right balance as to how I'm making your life better as a result of using that data. And obviously that equals financial gain, right? Because if I reduce friction, you buy more from me. But first and foremost, I'm doing it from a principal perspective to make your life better first and foremost. And then the financial gain sort of, flows through as a result of that.
This is an interesting question. So if a retailer doesn't have a significant online presence, how should they think about leveraging their physical footprint?
Buy online, pick up in store. And again, it depends on if it's a national retailer or sort of a more localized retailer. I've seen a lot of really interesting campaigns around social media and sort of leveraging foot traffic. And so I'll give you one very tangential example this weekend. It was Mother's Day, so Sunday. Went for a walk with my mom and my sister, and it was a beautiful day. I'm on Long Island, and we walked by this restaurant they must have been doing curbside pickup deliveries for people that pre-ordered for Mother's Day. But they set up a bar outside in the parking lot. And so I don't know if I get the sense this is sort of the case with everyone. The day when it's a weekend and a nice day, everyone is outside on the road, right? Like it's almost like you play Frogger if you're driving to avoid people. And so, in a place where it's a rural community, people usually aren't walking around, but because of people just need to get out of their house and they want the fresh air, they are. And so they weren't doing a bar with people sitting there and drinking. Obviously, they couldn't do that. But they attracted like visual attention to it. And it was basically like a to-go thing, right? You could buy a bottle of wine with it, or they even made cocktails in, little cups or whatever, pre-mixed cocktails. But it drove so much more traffic because people just saw it and it was interesting. And it was just really like an outdoor display. And again, they weren't breaking any social distancing rules or anything like that. And so I've seen a lot of really creative ideas to sort of create buzz and drive traffic. And then the curbside, I think, is like the way to go. And so the marketing is the top of the funnel, and then the execution is picked from store and just, contactless, deliver in trunk or whatever it might be.
That's great. JoAnn, do you want to wrap it up with one last question? We still have many questions left, Katie, but we'll let JoAnn with the ringer.
Yes. So how are you getting insights around what is the right way to run retail and stores in each community? So what kind of visibility and what data are you leveraging as a result?
There's obviously systematic ways to get that, but like first and foremost is leveraging the managers and the store associates on the ground. I think too often that's sort of utilized. And actually, back to my days at J.Crew, Mickey used to bring store managers. So we have line review, and we called them Mickey meetings every quarter, where we'd present the line and the buy plan. And the front row, the whole front row of seats, it was not the chief merchant, it wasn't the chief designer, it wasn't Jenna Lyons, it was all store managers that he brought in. And they would say, like, yeah, that's like very cool, but no one would buy that, right? And you got like that human perspective of like on the ground what really happens. You might sell that in the Fifth Avenue store, but like you're not going to sell that, across the chain. And I think too often in sort of lean methodology, right? Too often the people on the ground have so many insights and quite honestly ideas, right? If you're looking for quick wins and operational efficiencies or way to save money, that should be your first place to go is talking to them. So yeah, there's systematic ways, but I think like literally just picking up the phone and seeing what's going on is very valuable and usually underutilized.
So Katie, if you could just give us some parting words of wisdom as we think about the future of retail and the future of innovation, you know, how the two continue to intersect and what should we pay attention to and how should we think about it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's interesting, scary times, right? And completely unknown no matter what industry or what vertical in retail you serve. And so I would say definitely don't cut off your nose to spite your face, right? Like you have to make the right move to grow your business, but take a long, hard look at things, maybe a little bit more discerning than you would. You know, do we need to do this, or can we actually do this in a minimum viable way, or a cheaper way, or a faster way? And so start getting consumer feedback quicker before we invest in some whole big solution. I think we, as an industry, need to do more of that. And you know, unfortunately, this unfortunate situation has been a positive catalyst, at least to that piece.
Thank you, Katie, for your insights and your wisdom. JoAnn, thanks as always. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week. Be well.
Thanks, everyone.